A matchup a lot of you guys have been requesting, and one that's really interesting to think about, was who would win in a fight between father and son with Edward versus Haytham. Obviously, this fight was never possible unless Edward is fighting against the 6-year-old Haytham, because Edward dies when Haytham is just a child, and that's one of the biggest defining moments in Haytham's life, and what leads him down the path he goes on. It's funny though, because I've always thought about, what if Edward didn't die? How would things have turned out? Imagine if he was in Assassin's Creed 3 with Connor and Haytham. Whose side would he take? And if we took Edward in his prime and pinned him up against Haytham in his prime, who would win? Because despite being father and son, they're still very different people with different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to fighting. But also, as people, their personalities are like exact opposites, and Connor's different from both of them as well. The Kenway bloodline has a lot of unique individuals. But first, let's talk about each character's intelligence. Now, on the surface, most people would likely assume Haytham is the far smarter of the two, simply because Edward doesn't always act the smartest, even though he's a lot smarter than he typically lets on. Again, he killed an assassin, took his robes, and convinced the Templars he was Duncan Walpole. The fact he was able to pull that off for so long, I found very impressive. But that doesn't necessarily make him smarter than Haytham. Haytham is probably one of, if not the smartest characters in the series, whether that's about philosophies and the goals of the Assassins and Templars, and his view on the world, his extreme battle IQ and ability to assess and create good plans and strategies. He was chosen as Grand Master of the Colonial Rite for a reason. He could be quite the mastermind too, manipulating people into doing what he wants. When it comes to a battle of wits, I definitely think Haytham surpasses his father, but I'm not gonna sleep on Edward. He's a lot smarter than he lets on, but I'm thinking in a fight, Haytham may be able to devise some sort of plan to get the drop on Edward. How about their tools and weapons though? In terms of sheer volume, Edward obviously carries a lot more weapons on his person. He can of course have 4 pistols and uses 2 swords. Haytham seems to be a little more minimalistic, typically using a singular sword. Both use the hidden blades despite not being assassins. Of course, Edward eventually becomes one, but he used the hidden blade for years before that. Let's also not forget that Edward has a big advantage over Haytham when it comes to the sea. Edward had the jackdaw, whereas Haytham didn't even like to be on the water. So if these two fought in the sea, Edward would dominate. That's his domain. When it comes to physical attributes though, I'd say they're likely quite even. Maybe it slightly goes in Edward's favor because of some of the extreme situations he's been in, having to fight on land and sea. He definitely relies on brute strength and physicality more than Haytham. Haytham's more precise and calculated, while Edward is a little more aggressive like his grandson Connor.
Give me Lee!
And perhaps one of the reasons Haytham is more technical is because of his training and background. I mean, Haytham from a very young age was taught by Edward himself. He's one of the few characters in the series to receive training from both assassins and Templars. He's walked both worlds. Edward's training and background was definitely more practical, learning through experience, first being a privateer, and then of course a pirate for many years. He's self-taught and learned through experience in many ways, and he learns very quickly, being able to adopt the ways of the assassins, despite not having any training from assassins themselves whatsoever. Haytham and Edward had very different training and backgrounds, which explains the difference in their fighting styles and skills. But if they were actually to face off in plain old one-on-one combat, who would win? That is such a tough one, and let's eliminate any family attachments here, because like we saw with Connor, Haytham obviously held back when it came to fighting his own son. He'd probably do the same with his own father, and vice versa with Edward to Haytham, so let's just eliminate all attachment. 2 enemies fighting in combat. Like I said, Haytham is the more technical and skilled fighter, while Edward is the more aggressive type. There's a bit of an inconsistency with Edward as well. He was able to clear entire ships worth of people in combat combat in Black Flag, but then when he's actually taken down, it's only to a few people, which is a very lame way for such a legendary and renowned pirate captain and assassin to go out. But we're still talking about Edward in his prime in this specific scenario, so if these two were to fight one-on-one, I think I'd give the slight edge to Haytham personally, but obviously it would be a very close fight, I imagine. When it comes to stealth, I think Haytham also had an advantage. Again, Edward wasn't taught how to tail or assassinate someone, but he's very good at it anyway. But I still feel Haytham is better when it comes to the stealthier aspects. The theater assassination at the beginning of AC3 is a perfect example. He's basically like a master assassin if they were a Templar. He fights like an assassin and uses their techniques and weapons, but he's a Templar. A lot like Shay, actually, in that respect. And of course, intelligence factors into that as well, creating and executing plans and different strategies. So if Edward and Haytham weren't just fighting in one-on-one open combat, and instead had a more stealthy encounter, I think that would be to Haytham's benefit. So with all of that in mind, who would win between Edward and Haytham? Well, if it's a battle in the sea, that is obviously Edward, but on land, I think the victor is...
I am the victor?
Connor, this isn't even about you, man. Anyways, the winner on land, in my opinion, would be Haytham. His smarts and overall skill, I think, surpasses his father's, and really Haytham's only weakness shown in AC3 was Connor. So assuming that's not holding him back in this fight, he can just unleash. It's sort of hard to compare Edward here, especially since he taught Haytham, so this is one of those examples where I think the student succeeds the master. But of course, this is just my opinion. Let me know down in the comments who you think would win and why. Also, let me know what matchup you'd like to see next for this series. I've made tons of other videos like this for the different characters of Assassin's Creed, so feel free to check those out if you'd like. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and considered subscribing to the channel if you're new. I also have a channel membership with exclusive perks. If you're interested in joining, the link for that is in the description. And other than that, thanks for watching and have a good day, Assassins.
Give me leave!